وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنة ما هكذا الظن بك، ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم يا ربي، وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها، وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكفو يسير بقاء قصير مدته، فكيف احتمال لبلاء الآخرة وجليل الوقوع المكاره فيها، وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض يا سيدي، فكيف بي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الذليل الحقير المسكين المستكين، يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو لما منها ضج وأبكي، لأليم العذاب وشدته أم لطول البلاء ومدته، فلئن صيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي وربي، صبرت على عذابك فكيف أصبر على فراقك، وهبني صبرت على حر نارك فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك، أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجاء عفوك، فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا لئن تركتني ناطقا لأضجن إليك بين أهلها ضجيج العاملين، ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستصرخين، ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين، ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين، يا غاية آمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين، ويا إله العالمين، أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته وذاق طعم عذابها بمعصيته، وحبس بين أطباقها بجرمه وجريرته، وهو يضج إليك ضجيج مؤمل لرحمتك، ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك، ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك يا مولاي، فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك، أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يعمل فضلك ورحمتك، أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه، أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفه، أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقه، أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا ربه؟ أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها؟ هيهات، ما ذلك الظن بك ولا المعروف من فضلك ولا مشبه لما عاملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك. فباليقين أقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعذيب جاحديك وقضيت به من إخلاد معانديك لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما. لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين وأن تجل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون. إلهي وسيدي فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمتها وغلبت من عليه أجريتها أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبت وكل قبيح أسررت وكل جهل عملت كتمته أو أعلنت أخفيته أو أظهرت وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم وبرحمتك أخفيت وبفضلك سترت وأن توفر حظي من كل خير تنزله أو إحسان تفضله أو بر تنشره أو رزق تبسطه أو ذنب تغفره أو خطأ تستره يا ربي يا ربي يا رب. Everyone together يا ربي with more energy يا الله يا ربي يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي يا ما بيده ناصيتي يا عليما بضري ومسكنتي يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب. Don't be shy. يا ربي رب يا ربي رب أسألك بحق قدسك وعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي في الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورة وبخدمتك موصولة وأعمالي عندك مقبولة حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا يا سيدي، يا من عليه معولي، يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب يا ربي رب يا ربي يا ربي، قو على خدمتك جوارحي، واشدد على العزيمة جوانحي، وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك، حتى أسرع إليك في ميادين السابقين، وأسرع إليك في المبادرين، وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين، وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين، وأخافك مخافة الموقنين، وأجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين. اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرد، ومن كادني فكد، واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك، وأقربهم منزلة منك، وأخصهم زلفة لديك، فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك. وجد لي بجودك، وعطف علي بمجدك، واحفظني برحمتك، واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا، وقلبي بحبك متيما، ومن علي بحسن إجابتك، وأقلي عفرتي، واغفر زلتي، فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك، وأمرتهم بدعائك، وضمنت لهم الإجابة. فإليك يا ربي نصبت وجهي، وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي، فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي، وبلغني مناي، ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي، واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي. يا سريع الرضا، يا سريع الرضا، يا الله، يا سريع الرضا، اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء، فإنك فعال لما تشاء، يا من اسمه دواء، وذكره شفاء، وطاعته غنى. ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء، وسلاحه البكاء، يا سابغ النعم، يا دافع النقم، يا نور المستوحشين في الظلم، يا عالما لا يعلم. صل على محمد وآل محمد، وافعل بي ما أنت أهله، وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله، وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه. من قرأ سورة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Inshallah, we'll have a 5-minute break and then inshallah we'll continue. أفرح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم مصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين وصلى الله عليك يا سيدي ويا مولاي يا حجة الله يا ابن الحسن يا صاحب الأسر والزمان اللهم صل على محمد. As we mentioned in the past weeks, the salawat in the Hussaini mission deserves a little bit more, and it's not for just, fun. It's genuinely for our souls. It opens our souls, it gets us connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the intercession of those who were given this divine wisdom from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we hope to gain a bit of that wisdom today. So inshallah, to seek their intercession of the Holy Ma'sumin alayhim afdal salati wassalam. Aflaha man salla ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Dear brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I wasn't a big fan of the 5-minute break until the chai came back, so I'm glad we've reinstated it. It's exactly what I needed. I think it's the first time I've smiled so wide for so long, so it's lovely, surprising. May Allah banish COVID faster if it's meant to be the case, because I'm listening to and Boris Johnson. Allah. Okay, let's get going, inshallah. We've, alhamdulillah, been really blessed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, genuinely, to have these sessions thus far. And we've now entered session number 10, where the concept of adala begins to draw to a close, at least our introductory understanding of it, and then we move on to the next about usul al-nubuwwah, followed by imam, and inshallah Allah gives us the tawfiq towards ma'ad al-qiyam. We've covered a few different angles in adala, and we said that from our usul, tawheed was that linchpin, it was the critical part. And if we manage to jump over that fence into the concept of the limited to the unlimited, then we've cracked something about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or we've cracked something about our understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you like. And we said when it came to adala, if we could get past this concept of his justice, now we've got a super solid base, because these two are essential for us to journey towards nubuwwah, imamah, and qiyamah. And in fact, it's at the point of adala where we do see splits from amongst Muslim sects, and at that point they start to reject other usul that we believe in, such as imamah and adala go hand in hand, and they typically go and reject both. So when it came to adala, we started with proving it. We then looked at seeing its significance amongst God's other traits. Why is it that the adala of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is singled out within our usul rather than his rahmah, rather than his maghfirah, rather than his so on and so forth? And then we looked at the correlation between justice and evil. Is it possible for there to be evil in the world if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just? And how do these two concepts play against each other? And we said we have a new set of glasses that doesn't let us see things now looking at evil. Rather, we see it as the absence of goodness. And we had a whole discussion around that. And then we journeyed to an amazing debate that still trickles on till today. Not that none of these don't, but this one in particular, the concept of predestination, that we are robots that are programmed to do X at Y time with Z action, or we completely do whatever on earth we want. And initially we said this sounded crazy, that we have no free will, because with this chai I can turn it upside down, and yeah, I think I can do that, and I'm not programmed to do it at a given time. So we said that makes sense, that that's negated. Then we said, so are we on the other extreme? Are we on the side where we can do whatever on earth we want, and we're completely independent? And it was this connection where we saw, actually no, we're not as far left as we think. Yes, we have free will, but we're not completely independent. Why? Because there's only one single thing that is completely independent, and that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the example that we gave was, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted, he could turn this building upside down. He could switch me off at any single moment. And we used the beautiful example from Ayatul Nasr, that just like a train that is connected with that overhead wire to the electricity, that train can start, stop, open the doors, put its lights on, turn them off, make an announcement, whatever, at its own will. It has this degree of free will for sure. But the moment it's turned off, or the moment the electricity disconnects from that train, it's finished. So it, by definition, cannot be independent. It is dependent. But there is a degree of free will and journey that it can go on. We're very much the same. And then we looked at to what extent, therefore, does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala get involved? If we do have this free will, but we're not completely independent, How does he get involved? How does he interact? Does he disrupt our movements? Does he not? Does he stop us from evil? Does he guide us? What's the fine line? And today, inshallah, we're going to finish and conclude this journey by asking the question, fine, I have this free will, I am dependent on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but He gives me the space to kind of see how I'm going to do, like the school child who has the option, either they revise or they don't, but the teacher kind of knows what they're going to do if they've not studied for the whole year and they're probably going to fail the exam. That doesn't mean he's interfering. So with all of that, when I make a mistake, when I commit a sin, for how long am I punished? What is the right way to think about and balance the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His punishment? Because, and we're hearing this again from many different attacks, but I think it's calmed down in recent times from the atheists and from others outside of the fold of Islam, that, oh, your religion is so horrible. There's on the one side, you're vicious, you decide to kill everyone that you see and whatever, loot them and kill them, and that, okay, that's for a different day. But we have this other argument that comes and says, your religion is so vicious. All it talks about is punishment, that you're always going to be in hell forevermore. Here's this verse, you'll be in hell forevermore. We're like, oh man, actually, yeah, there is this justice of Allah, and then we've got this concept of going to be in hell forevermore in certain situations. Is this just? Is this fair? How do we try and balance these? Why is it if I do something today, I'm in hell for the rest of my life? How does this work? One mistake and I'm finished. So inshallah, this is what we want to try and understand today. We're trying to figure out Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's justice and the issue of eternity. How do these two things work out? Is it fair? Is it not fair? And how can, inshallah, can we correct our understanding? And inshallah, with your permission, we begin with the salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Okay, for those of you who have Quran on your phone, we're moving to Surah number 9, verse number 68 to begin with. If you haven't downloaded iQuran yet, please do. I've mentioned this a few times, and I just discovered for some reason you can add tags and then put bookmarks under certain headers. It's quite cool. So please check it out. So Surah number 9, verse number 68. Now, even without listening to the translation, have a listen to some of the words that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has in here. And imagine, are these the kind of words that trigger the atheists that come and attack us? Ready for it. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَعَدَ اللَّهُ الْمُنَافِقِينَ. Munafiqeen. What's going to happen here? وَالْمُنَافِقَاتِ وَالْكُفَّارِ. Oh my God. Now what? Nar. Oh my God. Jahannam. Oh my, and it's like, it's got all of the words that kind of like make us go, okay, panic, panic, panic. This is a verse I'm probably not going to put on Facebook and be like, everyone liked my post because I posted about the kuffar, munafiqeen, and hell and for eternity, right? These are the kind of verses we don't like to talk about. So what does it say? Wa'ad Allah. Allah has promised al-munafiqeen wal-munafiqat wal-kuffar nar jahannam khalidina fiha. Oh man, it's got it all. Hiya hasbuhum wa la'anahum Allah wa lahum 'adhabun muqim. It's like one of the scariest verses you'll find in the Quran, I think, right? Allah has promised the hypocritical men and the hypocritical women and the unbelievers the fire of hell to abide therein. It is enough for them, and Allah has cursed them, and they shall have lasting punishment. How many of you guys like tennis? Just a quick show of hands. Yeah? Heard of the concept game, set, and match? This is kind of it, right? You're finished. In this moment, you're done. Okay. What happened to Allah's justice? What happened to His mercy? What's going on here? Scroll down 4 verses later, go to Surah, verse number 72, sorry. Again, we start with the wa'ad of Allah, with the promise of Allah. But instead of munafiqeen and munafiqat, we have mu'mineen and mu'minat, the believing men and the believing women. And now we're like, okay, I'll post this one on Facebook. This one I'm more comfortable with. وعد الله المؤمنين والمؤمنات جنات تجري من تحتها الأنهار خالدين فيها ومساكن طيبة في جنات عدن ورضوان من الله أكبر ذلك هو الفوز العظيم. Allah has promised the believing men and the believing women gardens beneath which rivers flow, to abide in them, and goodly dwellings in gardens of perpetual abode. And best of all is Allah's goodly pleasure. That is the grand achievement. 100 likes, guaranteed. We're good. 4 verses apart. One, imagine, poor guy, he's reading the Quran for the first time. He's got to Surah number 9, beautiful. He's got to this verse 68. He reads that bit, shuts the book, he's finished. He's panicked. Just a few verses later, Allah's like, hold on, there's another side of it. For the believing men, believing women, look at this beauty that I'm about to give you. So how does this work? Or more concrete, what we're trying to figure out more concretely and more precisely is, why is it that if I do wrong during a finite period of time, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years I was misguided, Allah is now saying, خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا, forevermore you're going to be stuck in this. How is that fair? How is that just? 5 minutes of a sin. Sometimes, even if we'll use the example of murder in a moment, murder takes seconds. Seconds. Yes, there's an intention and whatever, but seconds. Yet you could be in hell forevermore. A lifetime of 100 years, but I'm in hell forevermore. How on earth is this fair? How does this work with Allah's justice? Now, we're obviously going to quickly accept and move on from that from the good side, if we do a little bit of good, we get eternal goodness. We'll take that bit. So we're going to move that to one side because that makes sense in our head. Because we realize Allah's mercy. But how, on the other side, does it make sense? To understand this, we need to look at 3 main points. The first of which, and I'll mention the concepts and I'll explain it, and that is this: punishments on Yawm al-Qiyamah do not resemble punishments in this world. So all of a sudden, we need to take off our current set of specs and put on the next set of specs. Punishments on the day of resurrection do not resemble punishments in this world. Let's try and understand this, right? In clearer terms, the difficulties which one bears in the other world, in the next world, in what's to come, are the direct result of what we've done here today in the now. But they're separate situations, they're separate contexts. Yes, they link, but they're separate dimensions, if you like. And the Holy Quran in Surah 36, verse 54, then on that day, not a soul will be wronged in the least, and you shall be but repaid the deserved share of your past deeds. So you know you're going to get it, good or bad. We know it's coming. So how do we understand this? That for one moment of error, which could be severe, and moment, 100 years, because 100 years compared to unlimited, it's literally just a moment. In just one moment, I'm then held to account for the rest of my life. How does this balance? We'll use this example for our brains to try and comprehend that they're 2 separate dimensions. If someone drinks, or does drugs, or whatever it is, they're enjoying, if you like, their narcotics in the short term. Even though the UK government, credit to them, have on cigarette packs, for example, don't smoke or whatever, and maybe on alcohol they probably don't do it because they really, really enjoy it, but they'll say like drink aware and gamble aware and whatever. You can give all of these warnings. It's going to give you cirrhosis of the liver. It's going to give you this issue. It's going to give you this issue with your brain, whatever. You can give them all of the disclaimers in the world, but they don't listen. They still continue. And as a result, over time, what happens? They develop these issues in their health. And they suffer with it for the rest of their life. And they probably rue that mistake for the rest of their life. And they're complaining about it on their deathbed. Would anyone in this world, again, with a rational brain, with an intellect switched on, who's reasonable and honest, would they say, oh, it's unfair that this person who did drugs for 10 years now has to suffer for the rest of his life? No. Because they got all the warnings. They were told about it. They knew it was going to happen. And unfortunately, I'm very sorry to say to you, sir, you're now going to have some impacts. It's a tough situation, but we all kind of know the science is there. It's obvious. You've had the warnings, right? It was your decision at the end of the day. No one forced you to do that. They may have encouraged you to a point, but we said someone can take you to the last point, but it's your decision to do it or not. Their own free will towards a bad action that they've been warned about. And guess what? They're going to have to rue that mistake for the rest of their life. We know that's the case. It's tough, no doubt, but no one would deny that that's unfair. You've done it to your body. Unfortunately, that's your issue. And the punishment of the Day of Judgment is just like this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala looks and analyzes, okay, how have you done? And then there's an appropriate punishment on the back of it. Because of your deeds, because of what I've done, because of the mistakes I've made, there's going to be an appropriate punishment as a result. So no one can object to the just nature of this concept. You brought it upon yourself. Who else are you going to blame? The second way that we need to think about this question, which is why is it that for a moment, inverted commas, for a moment of mistake, that I now have to rue it for a longer period in eternity? Maybe for the entirety, I don't know, we'll come on to that in a second. The second part is maybe we've misunderstood the time limit. And again, we'll constantly see this as you begin to learn more about the akhirah, we begin to realize just how weird and warped our understanding of time is, and how difficult we find it to comprehend unlimited time. You know, if someone says the exam's going to be 4 hours long, especially in university when you get told like 4-hour exams, like, whoa, I was used to like 90 minutes, 2 hours max. 4 hours, you're like, okay, well, halfway, 2 hours. There's no halfway in unlimited. It's a very scary concept. There's no reference point in unlimited. It doesn't end. And it makes us feel a little bit worried because time is one of those basic things we compare things to. So maybe we've got a misunderstanding of the time. What do I mean by that? And that is that it's wrong for people to assume that the time limit of the punishment must be exactly the same as the sin. What do we mean? You commit a sin, but then you're punished for a lot longer. So some people say this is unfair. From a time perspective, they challenge it. They say, when I think of this from a time perspective, you only made the mistake for such a short period. Why do you now have to rue this mistake forevermore? It's incorrect of us to use the set of glasses that looks at this concept with the view of time. We're understanding it incorrectly. Why? Because the relation between a sin and its punishment is not a temporal thing. It's not a time-based thing. Again, if you look at, I'm not sure if this example will work, but I'll try it. Here in the justice system, we do kind of have a concept for how long you will be put in prison for if you make a mistake of certain gravity. If you, I don't know, because sometimes people get away with it, you know, depending on many other factors. But let's say, for example, you have assaulted someone very, very intensely and they've ended up in a coma, they've not died. Maybe they'll say you get 30 years. We kind of correlate, you've done something wrong, therefore I associate a timeline to your punishment in jail. But there's still a timeline to it. What we're saying here is that you shouldn't see this as a time thing. You should see it on what you're actually doing. It depends upon the result and the quality, if you like to use that word, or the impact or the severity of the sin that you've committed. That's what matters, not the time it took to do it. You murder someone in a second, but you have the longest sentence. You do a year's worth of corruption trying to smuggle people's bank details, but you get a shorter sentence. So you can't use the argument that time is the right lens to look at this. Time is not the factor. It's the intensity of the sin. And again, using that exact example, he was committing fraud for a year. Therefore, we give him 100 years. He killed someone in a second. Because it was a second, we'll give him 1 year in jail. No, it doesn't work like that. Time is not the right lens for justice. So when we say, I only made this mistake, why am I going to get punished for so long? Don't think of it in terms of time. Think of it in terms of the severity of the sin that I have committed. The third view that we then need to take on this, and again, just to recap, this is to understand why is it that all of this lasts for so long. Eternity in hell and eternal punishment, note the word eternal, forevermore, never-ending, perpetual, all comes from the same kind of thing, doesn't stop. Eternity in hell and eternal punishment only belongs to those people of a certain characteristic. Of a certain characteristic. It's to those who have actively closed all doors to salvation for themselves. They've made a conscious decision to reject and stay away. This isn't an Ayatollah Nasir's guidance here, but I'm going to share an example that one of our teachers gave in Tafsir that I found very interesting, where he spoke about kufr, disbelief, if you like. There are many different translations for it. But he gave the explanation of what kufr actually is. And I found this really inspiring, because inshallah, and again, because we're here, and alhamdulillah, you've made this decision, we hopefully are not in the fold of kufr, but in its initial sense. But maybe we're in the fold of kufr in different parts of our lives. And this is where just this understanding that we go, wow, that's actually quite scary when I think about it this way, right? So inshallah, we're not in kufr of Allah, but we're maybe in kufr in other parts of our life. And let me explain this. He said, kufr, when we translate it as like disbelief, it does it a bit of a disservice. Kufr is actually, if you're shown the light to something, but you actively shut the door to get rid of that light. So when Hussain is sleeping and the light's on in the corridor, I'm actively shutting the door to make sure the light doesn't come in to wake him up. I'm actively trying to do it. I see it, I acknowledge it, and I make a decision to get rid of it. This is kufr. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through His lutf, through His divine grace and mercy, wanting to guide His mankind, He says, look, come here, every Thursday night there's going to be a program at the Hussaini. So you come, and you hear about these words from Ayatul Nasr, and you're like, wow, you know what, this concept of Tawheed kind of makes sense, you know? I should really be engrossed in this, I should really get it. Oh, but that Saturday night party was way too good, and I know she's really popular, I know he's really popular, I really want to be a part of that. I actively close the door and I move away. And obviously, I'm using the example something quite futile compared, but you could say, oh, I actually see the light of Tawheed, but actually it's easier for me if I don't believe in it, because then I have no rules, I can do what I want, and whatever. So on the one hand, yes, inshallah, those of us here gathered here today, we're not suffering from kufr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we hope. But on a more subtle level, if you think about this, have a point, have I been told, oh, by the way, you know this salah is wajib, and you're like, yeah, shut the door on it. Okay, maybe it's a bit deeper than that. Oh, but you know, you can't eat that food, yeah, so okay, just shut that one. Oh, you know, you should actually do this, yeah, I don't fancy it. And it can get so subtle as you get more and more in the understanding of this faith. And it's not something to be like, oh, there's so many rules. It's something to be like, wow, look at the doors that I'm shutting. Look at the light I'm missing out on. Look at the love. Look at the mercy. Look at the forgiveness. Look at the greatness that I'm shutting the door to. Why? Because I think I am greater than that. And this is where kufr starts to get very subtle, even within our day-to-day lives. Anyway, we come back. So this eternity, this eternal punishment for certain individuals is reserved for a certain group, and that is those who have closed all doors to salvation for themselves. They've made that decision. And they've drowned themselves in corruption or kufr and hypocrisy, such that the darkness of sin just like engulfs them, right? You just know those kind of people that you're just like, I don't want to ever be anywhere near them. I don't want to even be associated. I don't even want to know them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about this in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 81. Nay, those who seek gain in evil and they use the word girt. I'll try and get a better word for that. See what it comes up with. That's useful. Give me a second. So those who seek gain in evil and are preparing themselves for their sins and actively wanting to take part in their sins, they are the companions of the fire. And therein they'll abide forever. It's for that specific group. They've completely cut their connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You could argue, by virtue of us, alhamdulillah, being here today, we've not cut our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So perhaps, and inshallah, we're not amongst this group who are, and look at the wording, the companions of the fire. That's a rough one. These are those who have shut all those doors to salvation. And Ayatul Nasr uses a really interesting way to describe this, right? Because again, it's all like very gory, very fire, whatever. But sometimes it's nice or better, or sometimes it's useful to look at what we're missing out on rather than what we're heading towards, right? So rather than the stick, sometimes use the carrot and say you're not going to get that carrot, so that's tough. What are we missing out on? Ayatul Nasr uses this beautiful analogy. He says, these kind of individuals are like birds which purposefully break their own wings, pull out their feathers, are obliged to walk forever upon the earth and are deprived of flying through the skies. What a lovely analogy to see what we're missing out on. Yeah, you want to shut that door of light that Allah is giving you. You want to reject that mercy, you want to reject that forgiveness, you want to reject that tawfiq, you want to reject that rizq, you want to reject that greatness, whatever. Continue rejecting it. But you're going to be like a bird that opts to walk than fly. You're missing out on one of the... If you ask And we actually do this at work when someone new joins. We're like, if you were to be an animal, what kind of animal would you be? The majority of people say things like bird or a dog or whatever. But birds, why? Because you can fly. It's such an amazing gift that Allah has given you. But the one who rejects this all from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like the bird that's just got rid of all of their wings. And they opt to walk. Look how much you're missing out on. And that's the way sometimes I think in this kind of like loving society where we like to only talk about like nice things and never evil things and be held to account and stuff. Sometimes it's nice to look at the more positive side of it, and if that doesn't wake us up, then maybe we need to go back to the stick and then bring us back. So what do we learn from this? And inshallah we'll try and conclude, because I was hoping that maybe you have some reflections on adala that we can discuss and learn from each other, and maybe introduce nubuwah if time allows. When we look at these 3 points that we've just mentioned, so just to recap them, eternity in hell and eternal punishment only belongs to a certain group of people. The understanding and the concept of time that we have when it comes to punishment versus what we've done is the wrong sort of understanding, and that the punishment of the day of resurrection does not resemble the punishment of this world. It's a different concept, so you can't cross-compare them. They're different. So when we notice these 3 different concepts and understand them, we realize that this eternal punishment only belongs to that certain group, and it doesn't oppose the principle of the adala of Allah subhanahu. It doesn't. Because it's all down to their own deeds. It's back to that concept of free will. And in addition to that, the divine prophets and the Quran and the A'immah alayhim salam have come and guided and guided and guided. And for every era, the Quran tells us you'll be raised with your leader. So that means that for every era, there is a leader. Therefore, everyone was guided during that point where they lived. But it's their decision whether they went away from it or not. So it's clear, therefore, that if individuals are ignorant and the invitation of the prophets are not known to them, and if they commit, therefore, their evil deeds deliberately, if you like, or sorry, not deliberately, but out of ignorance, they weren't aware of it, then they wouldn't receive such a difficult punishment. Those who actively reject, they're in a bit of trouble. Those who are unaware, it's a different context for them. And it's also necessary to point out that within Quran and within the Hadith as well, we see so much of this divine mercy and love and greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that even a whole number of transgressors, and they're specifically spoken about, even they are included in those who can still make it out and be okay. It's a very tiny group. And let me maybe be clearer. It's a small fraction. How many real numbers are included in that fraction is dependent on the day and age of where we live, but it's a very small percentage that are going to be in big, big, big trouble. That's not to say if you're out of that, you're fine. No. Maybe one day you'll be fine, but trust me, you don't want to touch any of that. But even a whole load of transgressors are going to be, to some extent, okay one day. And they're usually helped through the likes of intercession, forgiveness, or even a small, sincere, good deed that they did once in their life. Maybe that is the thing that's going to help them get out. And this is this whole balance of khawf and raja that we find with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The balance of fear and hope. Today's society, and I think I've mentioned this a lot in the sessions on Tawheed, in today's society we've become addicted to speak about the hope of Allah, the love, the mercy. And every single bad deed we have, there's an excuse that Allah is all forgiving. But we forget about khawf, which our parents' generation was brought up with. It's just like, if you don't do it, you're finished, right? We've gone the other way. But if you give a bird only one wing, they can't control where they're flying. You give them both wings, they can fly upwards. There's another group who, after which they've been punished for a certain time in hell, once they've been cleansed and purified, they'll return because of the divine mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the only group remaining is the one which has enmity towards the truth, who commits oppression, corruption, hypocrisy, such that their entirety is all about sin, vice, rejecting Allah. They're in a lot of trouble. Now, I know the questions may come, which is like, so do Jews go to heaven? Do the Ahl Sunnah go to heaven? Do the Hindus go to heaven? What about the guy in the rainforest that's never heard of the faith? All these kind of things. There's a lot of discussion about this, and if these questions come up, it's beautiful because it means that we're thinking in the right kind of way, like we're trying to understand the justice of Allah. This will require more sessions if Allah gives us the tawfiq. But these questions have been answered, and I think this is a really important point. They've been answered categorically, clearly, they're available in English in many different sources, and if you would like, I can share you the places where you can find them. I think as one, the World Federation Islamic Education Board have actually done a series of talks by very esteemed scholars on this in English that you can actually watch with some weird animations as well. I don't know why they did that, but it makes it a little palatable to watch. I'm going to stop there because I think, inshallah, that brings us to the end of the concept of adala, inshallah, the introduction of adala. I mentioned that if there was any questions or any thoughts that you guys had over the last 5 sessions on adala, we can try and cover it again. So if you have anything, please don't hesitate.
Just rewording it.
Rethinking. Allah always has something. Was today's session clear? Or was it all fine, inshallah? Okay, in terms of what comes next, and we'll maybe just do a very brief introduction to Nubuwwah. I'll keep it very brief. There's something really beautiful about our faith, and I'll put it this way, right? Something very, very, very beautiful about our faith. When I say our faith, I mean specifically not just Islam, but the madhab of Tashayyu. And that is this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through His love, mercy, his desire to guide His creation and to see them flourish, has come out and given us opportunities to be the best of the best of the best and to reach perfection. And He's given us 3 amazing gifts in Ahad Tashayyu, and even more you can argue. The 3 essential gifts. The Quran, the Anbiya, and the Imam. And I always say this to youngsters, right? I say, imagine you've got the mark scheme to an exam. How lucky would you be? I know, like in GCSEs and A-levels, I remember the big scary moment when I got to university that they don't give you a mark scheme for exams anymore. You're like, I used to revise backwards. This is like how I kind of used to do it, right? GCSE maths, you'd start from the mark scheme and work backwards. How do I structure my answer, whatever. If you have the mark scheme, you're going to smash it, theoretically. Well, practically, maybe not theoretically, right? Allah gives us the mark scheme in the Quran. And He gives us the Holy Prophet as an interpreter. And He gives us 12 guides thereafter to make sure we absolutely nail it. It's our choice whether we use it or not. But He's given it to clarify, to interpret, because it's complicated, right? The Quran is a simple book in one way, but complicated in another. It's got so much depth, maybe complicated is not the right word, it's got so much depth to understand, it needs an interpreter. Now, why I say that the school of Ahad Tashayyu in particular has an advantage is this. For our Sunni brothers and sisters, their belief is that after the Holy Prophet, it's now down to man's interpretation. Well, that's tough. Or even if you think about this logically, they stop and they say, look, after that, it's man's interpretation. Whether you believe or not that the likes of Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman and Aisha and Hafsa, and then all the way through to all of the leaders of their faith today, whether they are righteous or not, and I'm not here to discuss that today. Let's assume, and may Allah be the best judge of everything, that they are all righteous and clever. There is a difference between someone who is clever and righteous versus someone who is divinely guided with divine wisdom flowing through their veins. You can't deny this. Yes, we can prove that they are divinely guided and appointed as well. So take your choice. Which one do you want to follow? The one who the Creator has selected and continues to shower with more knowledge, or the one who is self-appointed without much of a criteria to make that decision? And I'm taking a very objective view here, and I'm trying to make sure it's objective and not go into obvious bias, right? And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has done with Nubuwwah and Imam, to bring down this faith, to clarify, to help us understand so that we can achieve our best, such that when we then move on to Qiyamah, it's an enjoyable journey for us, and not one that we are particularly scared of. So inshallah, with Allah's rizq, with rizq from Allah and with the permission of Allah, from next week we will, I think not next week, the week after, we will begin with Nubuwwah, inshallah. Final opportunity if anyone has anything, then of course. The brain's switched on now.
Yeah.
Go for it.
During Laylatul Qadr, our destiny is chosen for us, and since we have free will, we can choose what to do with it, whether good or bad. So say we do a bad action, how will that affect the destiny Allah has chosen for us?
I think this is similar to your question about predestination, like 4 or 5 weeks ago actually. So we just need to think back to last week or the week before, right? when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala writes, I know that this is going to happen for this individual, it's not that He has made it to be the case. It's that you are going to do things and He knows the outcome of it.
From your own free will.
From your own free will. So it comes back to that example of the individual who hasn't revised for the whole year, who has got 0 out of 10 on all 10 end of module tests. The teacher knows, and in that case, with a degree of certainty, not certainty, with a degree of certainty, poor guy is going to fail. But the teacher doesn't intervene. It's on their own free will, they answer it in their own exams, and guess what? That happens from their own experience. The slight difference with Allah is that He knows with certainty what you will do, and therefore He knows the outcome. That's the difference. So for example, practically, when we say, for example, you're going to Hajj, He knows that you're going to try, you're going to make the intention, you're going to have saved up, you're going to book it with this and that. He knows that the flight's going to work out, the visa's going to work out, you're not going to get thrown away because they see that your name is Shia and whatever. No, you're good. He knows what's going to happen. Doesn't mean He's interfering. But to remember what we said last week, there are points where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guide you, no doubt. If you're taking certain steps, He will guide you. Does He interfere and does He like pick you? You know, like, did you guys ever play like the game Black and White on the PC? This is going back some time. No? No one wants to admit it because they realize they're a bit too old. Oh man. Basically, it was like, it's a very weird game. They try and position you as like the creator of everything. A bit bizarre. So you build a village and you actually have a hand that's like floating in midair and you can like pick, it's almost like Sims. Like you can pick people up and put them into tribes and this and that. It's a bit more like old school. It's like old school Sims, put it that way. So you can do what you want. It's not like the guy's walking to school and just going to pick you up and lob you and chuck you in the river because he's bored, right? Which unfortunately is kind of what we used to do with me and my brother. I was a bit bored. Allah could do that in theory. He probably won't, hopefully. But it's not like that where, you know, some fallible mind just picks you up and chucks you. No, He's going to give you the space, give you the guidance, and then inshallah you'll head there. And we mentioned the conditions of guidance last week as well. That make sense? Any more for any more? If not, وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. We just Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at this point in time, as we finish this or try and hope that we've learned something from this concept of adala, that we now kind of see the world for a slightly different way. We don't, when something happens to us, go, oh, for God's sake, and blame everything on Allah. I kind of sometimes think that we're very quick to blame Allah in any situation that we face, right? We're so quick to blame Him, and He's done nothing wrong if you want to assess Him that way. So inshallah we can learn from this and actually realize, you know what? Evil is the absence of goodness. And let me be grateful for every single bit of goodness that I have. I'll give you one tiny example and I'll finish. When I think a few of you I mentioned, probably mentioned it a couple of times actually, I had toothache quite intensely in the last few weeks, right? And that was like the absence of goodness explained to me. Like, not having toothache is goodness. Having toothache is the absence of not having toothache, which, trust me, is not fun, right? So it's kind of this concept that just be grateful for every single second, every single breath, every single opportunity that you have. Because when it becomes absent, don't go and blame Allah. Be grateful that you had experienced it in the first place. Inshallah, we end with salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.
Thank you, Brother Sadiq, for another informative session. Our next session will be the week after next week, so in 2 weeks on the 10th of February. Please gather for Ziyarat Ali Yasin. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سلام على آل ياسين. السلام عليك يا داعي الله ورباني آياته. السلام عليك يا باب الله وديان دينه. السلام عليك يا خليفة الله وناصر حق
السلام عليك يا حجة الله ودليل إرادته. السلام عليك يا تالي كتاب الله وترجمانا. السلام عليك في آناء ليلك وأطراف نهارك. السلام عليك يا بقية الله في أرضه. السلام عليك يا ميثاق الله الذي أخذه ووكده. السلام عليك يا وعد الله الذي ضمنه. السلام عليك أيها العلم المنسوب والعلم المسبوب والغوث والرحمة الواسعة وعدن غير مكذوب. السلام عليك حين تقود. السلام عليك حين تقوم. السلام عليك حين تقرأ وتبين. السلام عليك السلام عليك حين تسلل وتكبر. السلام عليك حين تسلي وتكنت. السلام عليك حين تركع وتسجد. السلام عليك حين تحلل وتكبر. السلام عليك حين تحمد وتستغفر. السلام عليك حين تصبح وتمسي. السلام عليك في الليل إذا يغشى والنهار إذا تجلى. السلام عليك أيها الإمام المأمون. السلام عليك أيها المقدم المأمول. السلام عليك بجوامع السلام. أشهدك يا مولاي أني أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأن محمدا عبده ورسوله. لا حبيب إلا هو وأهله. وأشهدك يا مولاي أن عليا أمير المؤمنين حجته والحسن حجته والحسين حجته وعلي بن الحسين حجته ومحمد بن علي حجته وجعفر بن محمد حجته وموسى بن جعفر حجته وعلي بن موسى حجته ومحمد بن علي حجته وعلي بن محمد حجته والحسن بن علي حجته. وأشهد أنك حجة الله أنتم الأول والآخر وأن رجعتكم حق لا ريب فيها يوم لا ينفع نفسا إيمانها لم تكن آمنت من قبل أو كسبت في إيمانها خيرا وأن الموت الحق وأن ناكرا ونكيرا حق وأشهد أن نشر حق والبعث حق وأن الصراط حق والمرصاد حق والميزان حق والحشر حق والحساب حق والجنة والنار حق والوعد والوعد بهما حق. يا مولاي شقيا من خالفكم والصعد من أتاءكم فاشهد على ما أشهدتك عليه وأن ولي لك بريء من عدوك فالحق ما رزيتموه والباطل ما أسخدتموه والمعروف ما أمنتم به والمنكر ما نهيتم عنه. فنفسي مؤمنة بالله وحده لا شريك له وبرسوله وبأمير المؤمنين وبكم يا مولاي أولكم وآخركم ونصرتي معدة لكم ومودتي خالصة لكم آمين آمين. صلوات. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء السلطان يا أبا الحسن علي بن موسى رضا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب الزمان ألمان 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 من خدمة الزمان. السلام عليك يا شريف القرآن. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان. أجل الله تعالى فرجك وسهلا وحرجا وسحورك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم كل وليك الجد بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى عبده في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
West. He used to live in Florida.
Okay.
In 2 years, he mastered English to a point where he made Dr. Predestination. And freedom versus predestination is actually one of the things that made everything clear.
Please send that to me. Is there a copy?
I've got everything broken.
Send it to me, please. I'd love to read it. I love these debates.
This is what my wife is, a revert. So
Yeah.
I explained to her about this stuff.
Oh, I love that.
So you would really enjoy it.
I love this kind of stuff, man.
It's a fascinating concept.
And you know what? When it clicks, it really just changes everything. It's
Yeah,
such
but you have to empty your cup, It's not
hundreds. You got to reject the dirt. You clean it up, and then your cup's ready to accept.
Bro, what's your number?
0796 203 1986.
My name is Shuja.
Shuja.
Inshallah.
May we see you on the poster.